Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel simply is Discerning What is True. We're going through another particular chapter tonight with the title Psychology and Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, whichever way you want to pronounce it. This will be chapter 39, and the name of the chapter is simply called Collective Unconscious. Just bear with me here. So this is again, like I said, psychology and Kabbalah. Kabbalah, however you want to pronounce it. This is chapter 39, and it's called Collective Unconscious, as I think similar to what I call a political science. We would call those who we call the followers. That is, they also were the masses. They would continue to follow because they were unconscious of what they were involved in. How certain governments or certain people would try to overthrow the government, so to speak, that type of thing. Or they were thinking they were doing something positive, that is, providing freedom, and they were actually doing the opposite. See, they were actually destroying their own country. So, as the body was known to contain all the experiences of physical development, so it was believed the mind inherited the knowledge gained by the human race since it inhabited the earth. Freud acknowledged this archaic level within the psyche, but saw it as a primitive vestige. In contrast, Jung regarded the ancient stratum as the accumulated experience of humanity, a collective dimension embedded, or embed, I should say, in the unconscious of every individual. From here, it affects the psyche in many ways to influence contemporary affairs. Example is the need to conform to one's social group or professional trade union for protection. This was a reenactment of a prehistoric tribal situation. So too were many of the roles people played from the cradle to the grave. For instance, Jung perceived at his observation of both primitive and advanced cultures that parents held much the same position in all societies, and that there was clearly a common image of what a parent is and does. It was as if there was a universal archetype that was quite recognizable the world over. Jung perceived this phenomenon, or the phenomenon, I should say, as an objective psychological fact. Sorry, I hit the wrong button here. That had its own form of reality in the collective human mind, along with many other archetypal principles that have become part of this deep story, a deep level of the mind, I should say. Whoops, I pushed the wrong button here. Sorry. Hold on a second here. Okay, so the recognition of this dimension was of great importance because it separated the lower and more physical and the middle or more personal from that which was transpersonal. Here was an archetypical world. Let me do something else here. I'm trying to make sure this is proper. Let's see if you make it right here. So here was an archetypal world in its own right, which had little to do with the individuals, yet a profound influence what they thought, felt, and did in both their inner and outer lives. Kabbalistically saying, Jung had restated and identified the the realm of Yezara, known in other spiritual traditions as the astral world, the palace of the gods, paradise and purgatory, and many other names that describe the level which is above the physical, but below the spiritual. This world is not only the dimension of the psyche, but the habitat of angels and demons. It is also the treasure house of souls, where the, quote, as that yet unborn reside, and where the psyche is processed in its post-mortem and pre-birth period. Jung brought into the study of Western psychology what the Buddhist monk, Christian mystic, Muslim Sufi, and Jewish Kabbalist had known and written about it for centuries. Jung took the scientific community into what for it was uncharted waters. In the course of his wide research into the ancient knowledge, he repeatedly found the same descriptions, stories, and principles when this level of the psyche was being described. There he synthesized and related to what he observed in his patients as he began to discover the same symbolism arising in certain classical psychology and spiritual situations. As he theoretically and practically developed, so Jung began to formulate certain conclusions about the collective unconscious. For example, he said that, quote, the form of the world into which he, that is the individual, is born is already inborn within him as a virtual image, end quote. A Kabbalist in the 13th century wrote, quote, it is this image which receives us when we come into the world. It develops with us while we grow and accommodates us when we leave the earth, end quote. Jung saw this form as full of latent patterns and archetypes, in the same way as an infant's body has all its various systems in place at birth. These psychological processes, though, become active. He noted when a person perceives an object in the outer world that corresponds to the archetypal of a father, for instance, to whom the child responds in a certain way because the paternal image already exists in the mind. This archetypal form is so powerful that people who have been deprived of a father will project it upon men who have the fatherly qualities and seek to work out that ritual parent-child relationship in order to be able to mature. Kabbalistically, that is, the father figure is the symbol associated with the Sephirah of Hama, or wisdom. Standing at the head of the right hand and active column, it is considered to be the male aspect of the divine, manifest in the lower world of formation in the image of Adam, the father of mankind. On the opposite pillar is Eve, as Banah, the female counterpart and mate, who was formed after the spiritual Adam, or Bariah, or creation, has been transformed from a androgynous being. Now remember, androgynous means simply no sex, no male or female, which is what we would say God is. He has no sex. Like the primordial Adam Catman into a Yazarati, or psychological couple. From this comes the Jewish myth of soulmates, in which those of the same divine and spiritual root are divided at the psychological level and live in separate bodies while incarnated. Here is the origin of the idea that influences many people's search for their, quote, alter ego in a mate. Every spiritual tradition, be it a primitive hunter culture or the highest civilization, has its mythology. Some are simple stories of how the universe and humanity came into being, while others are extremely complex, involving elaborate metaphysics and subtle symbols that describe various levels. the way they work, and who and what lives there. Nearly all speak of mankind's descent into the lower worlds and of how individuals can rise to recover their proper place and the grace and knowledge that goes with it. Carl Jung analyzed many of these stories and perceived a pattern of spiritual development inherited in them. This is where he parted company with Freud and many other psychologists who only recognize the psychological and physical dimensions. Out of Jung's work on the collective unconscious emerged a general and detailed compositive picture based upon folklore, mythology, and various esoteric disciplines. This was related to the analysis of countless patient dreams as well as of his own. From these studies, he clarified the concept of archetypes. An archetype means the original model, but in this scene, it is the essential principle at the root of certain phenomenon. Early man had projected archetype images upon rivers, mountains, and the weather, but these were seen as exterior gods or devils. They were in response and personification of, say, a whirlwind or a waterfall. Jung's archetypes were connected with identifying social and psychological phenomenon. For example, archetypes like the innocence of childhood or the wisdom of the old are quite recognizable, as are the hero and the trickster, who not only occurs in mythology but operate as distinct human characters. One may see the card sharper in the marketplace of a Mexican town, or in the back room of a pub in London. And every army, from the ancient Egyptians to the British Special Air Service, has its men of valor. Such individuals are often quite oblivious of the model they are acting out, as are the average mother and father, who instinctively follows the directions of the archetype Eve and Adam. He has a picture here. Let me see if I can show this to you. I think this is in the book. If I can find it here. Bear with me just a second. Is here. There's plenty of artwork in this particular book for sure. May not find it. I thought I would find it very quickly. I'm not seeing it for some reason. Let's see. Must not be here, or else it's in here and I haven't found it. Maybe it's not in here. Oh well. It has a picture basically of the like almost a queen at the very top, and then it's a sparrows here, and then there's like something around it also here, and I thought it was in this particular book, but I don't see it for some reason, or it's here and I just haven't found it. Oh well. Let's continue on, wasting time here. So figure 41 is what they call the collective mind, which is where this is it here. Here, Queen Elizabeth I of England embodies the spirit of that country at the time. She projects what we call the archetypal image of the Virgin, to which her people respond in fighting fiercely to protect her purity, despite the fact that she was a great flirt. Here, the projection is enhanced by including all the virtues and the benevolence of the heavens. It is the powers of the collective that make people lay down their lives for their country. Shakespeare, Elizabeth's contemporary, built up an imaginary image of England in his plays in such line as, quote, this precious stone set in a silver sea. This is a 16th century woodcut. Again, it's called the collective mind, figure 41. Jung also cataloged many kinds of archetypal principles, ranging from situations like birth and death to objects such as rings, which can carry a symbolic meaning and state. Love and hate have archetypal forms, as do the events of meetings and partings. These archetypes he saw as pure forms until they were manifested by an actual incident which they took on a poignantly far beyond what people put into them. Any marriage, no matter in what culture, generates an enormous focus on power as people enter into an archetypal celebration of union. Everyone everyone who's involved draws out for more than they put in. From the instance the couple announce they are to wed until they depart on their honeymoon. All the rituals of meeting the family, setting up a home, organizing the wedding, and buying presents are highly charged social forms that even affects outsiders. The royal wedding between the prince and the late Princess of Wales drew a television audience of hundreds of millions of people. Such is the power of the collective, as it generates an interaction between the collective unconscious and the personal unconscious. Even many people of strong Republican traditions were deeply affected by the wedding, as the fairy tale story of aristocratic Cinderella marrying a future king was seen on the television screen. An example of the archetype on the individual level is the transition from childhood to youth. This is accomplished with what we call the archetypes of, quote, boy, end quote. It's displaced by the archetype of adolescence, again, in a quote, which the person adopts when all is dress and attitudes. Here's where we see the archetypal ages of man, planetary principles, and the Sephiroth at work behind the forms. The power of these modes is enormous and can be witnessed every spring when the eternal youth and maid suddenly manifest everywhere to play out the games of love, while the old look on and remember their time of courting. This collective archetype of Venus, Eros, or Nazad occurs in the primitive Brazilian jungle as well as the London sophisticated Chessy in communist China as a capitalistic California. Whatever young people are, so there the archetypes of romance will emerge. At the heart of such archetype is a principle that attracts anything that resonates with it. This follows the law that operates within the Sephiroth, sending out and drawing to them whatever is similar to their to their nature. These processes naturally come under the overall influence of the tree, so that all the archetypes are related to the Sephiroth, or that triad or column. This means that there is a order basic to Mithrids, of archetypes that correspond to various aspects of the tree. Seeing the other way around, out of the Azilolite tree, complexity and subtly arises Mithrids possibilities. These are multiplied threefold by the time they reach the world of Yazara, because it contains both the divine and spiritual dimensions as well as the psychological. Thus, the collective unconscious includes many abstract modes such as the divine, the polar archetypes of mercy and justice, and the spiritual archetypes of goodness and evil. Here are expressed in the religion, art, and literature of every culture. Divinity, for example, is universally portrayed as light, even as the image of Christ and Muhammad are used by the Christians and Muslims to symbolize a fully realized human being. In order to get some idea of how the archetypes operate, let us now look at the 10 key Kabbalistic symbols so as to see how they relate to the psyche. So we're going to stop that. It'll be chapter 40 next. That was chapter 39 I was reading here. Appreciate you being here. Again, my channel is Discerning What is True. This evening is Wednesday evening, that is. Reading a particular book called Psychology and Kabbalah tonight. I've been going through the whole book. If you're interested in the particular book, to read this is simply called Psychology and Kabbalah. And you can find it I'm trying to think of the name of the group that does this, puts it out, but I can put it on my Facebook page later if those who have interest in it. Appreciate you listening, like I said. Again, this was chapter 39. Thank you for listening. You have a good evening and take care.